We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter Podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter Podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Britt Lusk, city manager in Pilot Point, Texas. Oh man, I'm looking forward to this one, Britt. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on today.
Hey, Seth. Thank you. Looking forward to the conversation. Appreciate you reaching out to have me as a guest.
Yeah, well, you have, I think what's going to be a fascinating story for the audience today, both younger people thinking about local gov, maybe those who might be in non-local gov positions, maybe in the private sector, maybe in nonprofit work, who are thinking about maybe a next chapter. And in your story seems to have that. And so we're going to unpack that today. One of the things, just to tease out for our local government leaders listening to this, there was an article in the Business Review magazine titled Honoring the Past While Preparing for the Future. And when we get to where you're the city manager today in Pilot Point, just a place outside of Dallas, crazy growth. I mean, we're talking, when I looked up the population, I think when you came on in 2020, I think, we're talking like 4,000 people. And all of a sudden we just said, like, if you Google the population, it can't even keep up with it. I think you said it's like over 10,000 now. And so it's just like how, and somebody listening goes, 10,000, that's not a big city. When you're talking about going from 4 to 5 to 10, that is crazy growth, especially for the infrastructure of what local government has to do to make sure a city is not getting imbalanced and unhealthy and, able to actually provide all the services that it does. So I can't wait to dive into that story and really hear what you guys are doing to both. And I think the reality there, it's not just making sure you're growing and flourishing. It's also making sure that with that much growth, there's got to be people that are ticked off, right? In my city. It can't be, we can't do change here. Yeah. And the reality is, as a city manager, you're obviously sometimes you're not really a person, you're a figurehead, you're a role, and people get upset and they take it out on that title, not necessarily you. How do you handle that? How do you, that's why I like to highlight, like, there's a lot of great people, I think, they're doing great work, but the weight of that work can be heavy. It can be frustrating. And so how do we do it? How do we last to continue the good work? So before we unpack that professional career and those insights, take us back to the beginning, Britt. Tell us about where you were born and kind of the childhood that shaped you and launched you on this journey.
Yeah. So I was born kind of in this area in Corsicana, south of Dallas. But then pretty soon after that, I think it was like 5 maybe, my parents moved us to Brownwood, Texas, which West Central Texas. I know you've seen my background, Howard Payne University there in Brownwood. And so I went to school. My mom is like a 40-year teacher, 35-year teacher at Early ISD. And so I went to school at Early ISD and graduated from there and got my bachelor's degree from Howard Payne. But it was fun. It was a fun area to grow up in. I grew up on our family farm. is split up between all my grandma and all of her siblings. And so total, it was a bunch of acreage, but nobody owned a whole lot. And it was fun. And it's just getting to do our own thing out there on the farm. So
there's something that farm living and being raised on a farm just teaches you things that you just can't get anywhere else, right? I grew up on a ranch north of Seattle. Again, both my parents were working professionals. My dad was just born in the wrong. He was born 100 years too late, I think. He was a natural cowboy who longed to be a cowboy, but had to provide, and the farm wasn't really going to do that. And so it was his tax write-off, his play. And so, but yeah, I mean, working, you got to feed animals, you got to bring in, you just can't do it when you want. There are seasons, there are realities. And so it's an interesting environment to grow up in, and you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It sounds like you can't, I just remember I didn't have a lot of friends because there's no one around us. And so it was an area of imagination. And so what did it obviously when you get to Howard Payne University, you're going to get a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, which is again, an interesting degree. What were you thinking when you were growing up? What did you want to be? What led you into that path?
Yeah. So, growing up, when I was in high school, when I was probably in junior in high school, I, made my mind up. My uncle was a licensed specialist in school psychology. And he worked for a co-op and, was the director of a co-op. And I just thought that was really cool. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into counseling, and I wanted to be a therapist type person and do more of the testing and more of the just trying to help other students and stuff. And so I went and got my bachelor's degree in psychology, thinking that I was going to go from there and get my master's in some kind of psychology. Hopefully school psychology was what my goal was, and go on to become a school psychologist. My wife and I got married right out of college, and we had a baby. I mean, just turned 23 the other day. It was crazy. And so, I was 23 when he was born, and now he's turning 23. So it's really crazy. And so I didn't go get my master's right away. And I started working, for a child placement agency as a caseworker, which is kind of what you can do with a psychology degree, with a bachelor's in psychology. There's not a whole lot you can do with that. And so I worked for a small nonprofit as a caseworker, and managed a bunch of different cases for foster care. And it wasn't something I really enjoyed. It's very, very paperwork intense. And I'm not a very paperwork intense person. So, so I did that for a while, and then I decided I was going to try something different. And so I went back and got my teaching certificate. And I became a teacher. I was a special education teacher, because I figured if I still wanted to do school psychology, why not be a special education teacher? So I did that for a little while and realized that's not what I wanted to do either. And so I taught English language arts, English language arts for junior high. In my last class, I didn't have an aide, and I had 16 girls in that class. And decided teaching wasn't for me. So
they broke you.
Yeah.
That's so funny. So, I can't remember who I had another guest on recently who had the same, he started with teaching, and he said it was a class of girls that broke him.
Yeah. It's something about the junior high girls. I don't know. So
that's amazing. Hey, back up just a minute, because this is really fascinating in two ways. The first thing I just want to highlight is I love how you did different things, but you had self-awareness enough to go, man, this isn't it. This isn't it. There's things I like. There's things I don't like. I got to find a new fit. Sometimes I think I just run into so many people in life that get stuck with, well, I got this degree. Like you say, I couldn't get my master's, life happened. And so I just did this. And now they're just, it's like they won't take any risk, or they won't figure out how do I get out of this? Because this isn't the fulfilling thing. And I just want to encourage people, especially in today's age, that you can find something new. There's ways to step into new opportunities. Go back though for a minute, just because I love highlighting this reality. Did you have any awareness of local gov when you're growing up? Especially, I grew up on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, so it's not like we had a city hall, or I don't think we even had an incorporated city. But did you have any awareness? Did anyone in your family work for local gov? Any idea whatsoever?
No, I really didn't. My uncle was a county commissioner at some point, and I knew that, and I knew some about local government, but I didn't know about city management. I didn't know, I mean, which people still do approach me today, and they're like, well, what does the city manager do? And then you tell them that, well, I thought the mayor did that, or I thought, and so people still really don't get it. And so, so that's how I was the same way. Like I didn't know anything about local government. I had no intention of ever working for local government. And so, when I met my wife, her dad worked for the city of Brownwood. And so he was an inspector for the city of Brownwood. And so I kind of started, I knew that you had to get a permit for things. I knew that things had to be inspected. I knew those types of things, but I didn't really know anything about local government. So
it's so true. I mean, the vast majority, it's got to be in the 90 percentile of city managers I interview. Same story. No idea what a city manager was.
Yeah.
And this is why the podcast exists. And this is why we're taking some big strides to even maximize that in the years ahead about storytelling, because I think a lot of people, if they knew the opportunities, not just in city management, but in all the kinds of positions that are, people don't realize you have scientists, you have engineers, you have all kinds of people, all kinds of roles in city government. And it's really fulfilling because you get to see your work actually impact people's lives on the daily. And so so now you get this degree, you kind of have it. I love this. You're influenced by your uncle. You have this kind of here's what I'm going to do. This is going to be great. And you get the undergrad and then you get married, life happens and you're like, oh no, I gotta pay bills. And so you're doing this casework. I just wanted to highlight that real quick, because when I was a pastor, we did a lot of work with foster care. It was one of our big initiatives, and encourage parents to become foster parents and placing kids. And because there's such a great need. I mean, here, I'm sure it's all over the United States, but in Washington State, it's just the metrics are just outstanding and heartbreaking on how many kids just need homes. And like you said, with casework, it is hard work because there's so much admin, but there's also the people engagement can be overwhelming too, because it usually draws in people with big hearts, and you see so much bureaucracy, you see so much frustration, and man, that can take
you just want to help. Yeah, you just want to help those kids, and you feel helpless sometimes, and so because of the bureaucracy and all the things that are going on, and it's just you, and having to deal with that trauma and drama every day, it mentally just beats you down. It feels like a mental beating. And so I didn't last long there. And like I said, then I went to teaching, and then it's kind of the same thing, it was just day after day, and it was some of the same things. It's just like, and it made me realize and feel bad for my teachers. So, it's kind of funny because, when I became a teacher, the superintendent at the school I went to work for was actually my dean of students when I was in high school.
Wow.
And so as I walked into her new teacher orientation, he told me, he said, straight out of the principal's office into the classroom, hey, Mr. Lusk, so yeah. So, but I had a new appreciation for that,
It is interesting, isn't it? How, again, these experiences shape and mold. Like I think about kind of the bureaucracy and the tension of wanting to shape and mold, and just you're seeing the boundaries and the things that push up against that. I'm sure there are lessons, and maybe not even frontal lobe cognitive, but in your life now as a city manager, you look at bureaucracy a little bit different. You look at the red tape a little bit different. You look at the handcuffs that can feel put on against the change agents a little bit different. And I think that's the beauty of city management, is that all these things shape you and help you as you become really not in just city management, but in leadership. I think don't discount the things that you look at and you go, I don't know, like, why did I waste time? Like, oh gosh, I could have done this forever. And it's like, no, like those things are shaping you and they're molding you and they're helping you see some of the specific ways to have impact later in your career in those positions.
Yeah. And I didn't get into local government until I was, I think, 35 years old, which isn't old by any means. I'm not saying that, but just saying that because it's not something I plan to do. Yeah. And once I got here, I mean, I love it. And I couldn't see myself doing anything else at this point. So,
yeah. So in your story, again, foster care, teaching, you end up in 2010. Well, actually before that, before you end up at another foster care and adoption agency, New Horizons, to be an HR director, which again is a unique, there's an admin. You talk about like admin's not your thing. I don't know. It sounds like HR when I think of HR admin. But before that, you go to Angelo State University and you start a MPA in 2009. Why an MPA? What happened that led you to that decision?
Yeah. So before that, even there was 2 more career changes. So after teaching, I said, well, maybe I'm not meant to be, this kind of worker. So I went to work for a factory making, which is oddly enough, making water pipe. So I had no clue what I was making it for. Didn't know anything about public works at that time, but I knew that's what I was making. And so I went to work there, and it was long hours. It was shift work. It was night work some once. And once again decided that wasn't for me. So I went to work for MHMR and when I was at MHMR, I was doing casework again, but I was also doing risk assessments and working on call with the police departments and sheriff's office. When somebody would get hospitalized and would need a mental health, I would be the guy they called out for that and do risk assessments and stuff. And that was pretty cool. And I really liked what I was doing. So when a job came open, it was moving up into a more of a management type position. And I had gone through their leadership program as well. So the job came open and I got passed up by it. And I couldn't figure out why I got passed up by it. Because I thought I had just as good of experience. I thought I had just as the same education and went through the leadership program the same way. And it frustrated me to no end. And so I wanted to go back and get my master's. It was time to go get my master's. I wanted to better myself so I wasn't going to get passed up again. So I actually applied to Angelo State for a bachelor's in business administration. And I got accepted to their business school and the MBA program, but they told me I was going to have to do some undergrad coursework because I didn't have enough in my psychology background in business. And so I was kind of frustrated by that. And I expressed my frustration to one of my advisors. And they said, well, your psychology background, you can use some of that as electives for an MPA program. I said, well, what's an MPA? I've never heard of that. It's a public administration. It's just like a MBA, except for it's for the public sector. And so I don't know. That doesn't sound like something I want to do, And so I went back to work at MHMR, and the CFO there was one of my mentors. He still is. I mean, he actually came to see me in Pilot Point. But I asked him, I said, what is MPA? I have no idea. I've never heard of this. And so he was telling me about city management. And he told me, he said, you need to do this. You'd be perfect for this. You need to do it. And he was the CFO at MHMR, and he had previously been an auditor, and he had worked with different cities doing audits. And so he knew quite a bit about it. Was friends with several city managers that he'd worked around and with. And so after he told me that, because I really respected him and looked up to him, so I started checking into it some. And I just so happened to know, because where I graduated from Early, Texas. And at that time, Early was still very small, maybe 1,500 people. I had 70 people in my graduating class. Yeah. And I knew somebody I knew the assistant city manager. Didn't know what he did, but I knew him. And one of my friend's mom was on city council. And so I called both of them and talked to them and just tried to learn, hey, what is this local government stuff about? What is an MPA? And both of them encouraged me and said, oh yeah, you'd be great for this. You should look into it. And so I changed from the MBA to the MPA, started that program, and I just really loved it. And so I became a teacher again at Angelo ISD. And then And then I went back to work while I was still working on my master's degree for New Horizons, another child placement agency, and they had a residential treatment center. And so I was actually working at the residential treatment center as a group leader. And one day I had my group in Abilene at their central office because they were doing some testing and stuff for some of the kids there. And I was up in their building, and I went to an office, and I was just looking out the window because it was up in a high rise there in Abilene, one of the only ones in Abilene. And I was just looking out, and their systems admin came by and said, "Hey, are you lost? Can I help you?" And I just kind of jokingly told him, "Well, no, I'm just checking out my new office." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, this might going to be my new office." And so he said, "Are you really interested in working up here?" And I thought we were just joking around still. So I said, "Yeah." And then it turns out that they were hiring a human resources director. They knew I was working on my master's degree in public administration. And, when you go for your MPA, they say, "Oh, it'll work in nonprofits and public sector and, government." And so I was like, "Sure." And so next thing I knew, the executive director was calling me and saying, "Hey, if you really want to move up in this company, this is your opportunity." And so I became the HR director and got involved in SHRM and got involved in all these things. Just learned so much. I mean, it was just like drinking from a fire hose for me. I'd never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
But it was an awesome experience, amazing experience. Learned so much about administration, learned so much about just all the things that you have to do for HR. And then I graduated and had my MPA. So I started applying for cities all across the state of Texas, everywhere I could for anything. I was doing a lot of HR applications because I was an HR director. I'd had some experience at it at that point, and kept getting turned down or not even getting interviews. And so I couldn't figure out what it was. So I decided maybe HR director, maybe I needed to go somewhere a little different. And so that's when I went to work for the YMCA. And I became the youth and families director, and I had several programs. So I was a director and had several programs. So I thought maybe, if I got some opportunity working with the board of directors, got some opportunity juggling a bunch of things. And while I was there in Abilene, I would go sit with Larry Gildy a time or two in his office to learn about city management. He was the city manager in Abilene at the time. And then finally I applied for a job in Hobbs, because I figured it's close enough to Texas. And I did pretty good in the interview. The city manager actually called me and told me that I did pretty good and that they weren't hiring me, but he didn't want me to give up. And so I didn't think much about that. It was just a nice way to say sorry, right? And so a couple of months later, he called me up and said, "Hey, we're hiring a Parks and Recs director. Given your YMCA experience, you'd be perfect for this job." So I applied again on because he had asked me to, and I didn't get that job either. So, and so he called me again and said, "Hey man, you did great in the interview. I'm going to get you on my team. I want you on my team." And I was like, "Yeah, right. No way." And a couple months later, he called me up and said, "All right, this is not the job you want. This is a mid-level manager job. It's not a director job, but I want you to come work for me." And I was actually playing golf with a couple of my friends, and he asked me what it would take to get me there. So I told him, and he said, "Done." And so I accepted a job in Hobbs on the golf course. And I went there, and I was in charge of the recreation facility. And then after a couple months, I got grants and became the grant administrator. And then after a couple months, I got the animal adoption center, and my duties just continued to stack on. And within a year's time, I became the administrative services director. And so I made it my way up, and then I was there for about 5 years before I became city manager. So, but he really got me involved in the New Mexico City Management Association. He really got me involved in ICMA. I got to do the leadership ICMA, mid-career managers through ICMA. So it was a great opportunity. JJ Murphy was my first city manager, and he's one of my mentors. I still, anytime I get frustrated or need something, I still call him and say, "Hey, JJ, man, this is crazy." So
I think many people assume the AI and all of the new technology coming out, it's something reserved for large cities and urban counties with big budgets and dedicated IT teams. That is simply not true. Whether you serve in a rural township, a village, a small town, a city, or a county of any size, AI can help your organization work smarter, improve your resident service, and give your team back valuable time to focus on the work that matters most. Tyler Technologies is helping local governments of every size put practical AI solutions to work, helping make communities more efficient, more resilient, and better prepared for the future. To learn how your organization can begin using AI today in helpful ways, visit tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if you'll be attending the GMIS Meets Conference in Virginia, be sure to stop by the Tyler Technologies booth and join the AI at Work general session held on Monday afternoon to see firsthand how local governments are putting AI to work in practical, meaningful ways. Now, back to the conversation. I love this. Okay, let's first, I want to make sure for the national audience, Hobbs, New Mexico, and the next place where you're going to be a city manager in Tucumcari, New Mexico. These are in this unique spot where they're on, Hobbs is the southeast corner of New Mexico. It's probably the most southeastern city in New Mexico. It's down deep there. You are, I think from there, it's like 2 hours to Lubbock, Texas, and it's 5 hours to Albuquerque. So it probably feels more Texas-y than even New Mexican. And so
it's on the border of Texas and New Mexico right there.
Yeah, and then even the next stop, Tucumcari, is just a little bit more north. I mean, it's east of Albuquerque, 2.5 hours, but it's only an hour and 40 minutes west of Amarillo. So it's this unique kind of, I had on Sean Bennett, who's in the panhandle of Oklahoma. And it's that, again, these are kind of these unique areas that they're not the Dallas, it's not the Albuquerque, it's not kind of the regions of a state that people know. So tell us about that area. Tell us about Hobbs. What kind of is that city now? That I think it's a population of 40,000, so it's a good sized city. And tell us about Hobbs, but also tell us about the Director of Administrative Services, because I think we can see this. But what in the world is that role? It sounds like it's kind of a kitchen sink role. It could be anything. Yeah. It could be something specific. What was it in Hobbs? What did you oversee?
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't the traditional administrative services position in Hobbs. It was kind of just a title that went with it, like you said, the kitchen sink, anything and everything. I mean, I got performance management became a part of it. Grant administration was part of it. The Hobbs Animal Adoption Center was a part of it. The Teen Rec Center was part of it. Like I said, it was just a hodgepodge of just special projects, really. The city manager, he couldn't hire an assistant city manager, an assistant too, but it probably would have been more along those lines than an actual administrative services director.
That's what I was going to say. It sounded very assistant city manager, but it is interesting how, again, in cities, this is kind of gets into the political bureaucracy. It's like, oh, we don't have the budget for that, or we don't have the, that must mean this. People kind of get in their heads about what those roles mean. And so, well, we have to, they can do all the work. You can wear all the hats, but let's give you just this director of admin services, then we can throw anything under. Just kind of interesting city to city. That's where, I've had on military folks. I think of Peter Trotz, who was one of our first guests, high-end Coast Guard commander. And he said in the military, you can go any state and we can get in the cockpit of a helicopter. We all fly it because we have standard operating procedures. City to city, there is whether you're in the same state, whether you're neighboring cities, you can have roles that mean totally different things. And some call them deputy, some are assistants, some of them have both, but they're flip-flopped in kind of, the hierarchy. It's just, that's why you have to kind of ask the question, like, okay, what did you do? What did it look like there? Because someone could be listening right now and goes, I'm a director of administrative services, and I wouldn't be over any of those. And so, right. It's just kind of fascinating. So what did you, as you're in that position and you're wearing these hats, and this is the first time, again, you're actually in, city, in a city role in local government. What was it like to be in that? What was cool about it? What were you like, oh, this is really cool? And what were you like, this is crazy? Like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, I loved the experience. Just I got to learn so many different things. And because I had so many different things under my department, I got to work with so many other departments and learn about how they operated and what they did. And I mean, for somebody that was just getting into local government, it was a great introduction to local government. I mean, it was, like I said, I was working with the general services department because I had 2 buildings that I had to maintain, and I had to, work with them with the electricians and everything else. And because I was working with Animal Adoption Center, I got to work with our community development services department because, the code enforcement and animal control was under that department. So, and then of course I had the recreation center. So I was a part of the parks and recreation team also. And so it was really a cool deal. And then of course with grants, worked with the finance department and budget, all that kind of, so it was a neat opportunity to be somebody just getting introduced into local government and working my way up into that director's seat and getting to work with all the departments and learn from them. And then, like I said, JJ was super at getting me involved with the New Mexico City Managers Association. So then I got to start knowing city managers across the state of Texas or state of New Mexico and learning from them. And okay, so how do you do things in Los Lunas, way across the state, and it like you said, our region, Hobbs is probably more like Texas than it is New Mexico. It's not down that Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Las Cruces interstate there. So it's kind of like a stepchild a little bit, it's just, it's way different. And so, but learning how getting involved and learning how the different cities would operate compared to what we were doing in Hobbs, it was really a neat opportunity.
It sounds really cool. And to encourage maybe someone who is interested in local government that, like you, maybe hasn't served in local government yet, and they're kind of dead set on, no, I want to be a city manager, and so the only option, I want to either be a city manager or an assistant city manager. And so I just want to encourage, like, here's again, you came in not even as the director of admin, you came in kind of in a management role, facilities, and yet, because you are who you are, you took on more responsibility, said yes. Finally, they got to create a director title for you because you got to carry wearing so many hats. And I think that's also, there's some humility there, but also the drive there. And what happened is you were able to see so many. I think that's what's so cool in local gov. Your eyes were open to, oh my gosh, there's all these departments, and look at what we're doing, from animal control to parks. And oh my goodness, I didn't know I'm sure it was eye-opening to be like, local government is involved in everything. This is just wild.
Yeah.
But then to shape you and mold you for the city management position, which would be the next thing, I'm sure that gave you much greater insight from a level. Sometimes if you just get put into assistant city management, if that's the track, and then city management, I wonder if you haven't had enough time really in the streets, really around like the frontline employees that maybe make some things happen, to see really under the hood. You kind of get the gist of the car, but you haven't been under that hood. And I'm sure it gave you a much deeper appreciation in how you connect with teams and how you lead today on Pilot Point. Talk about maybe how, because the next stop is going to be Tucumcari, New Mexico. You're going to be the city manager there for a couple of years, population a little over 5,000. Again, this is east of Albuquerque, a couple hours in the west of Amarillo, Texas. Tell us about that unique city, and what was it like now to be in the city manager seat?
Yeah, it was completely different than what I expected. Hobbs is really unique, and especially when I was there, Hobbs is really unique because the oil field was doing well, and so when the oil field does well, the city does well. And so, unlike a lot of cities, they maintained it like a 50% reserve fund because the oil field was so volatile. But when it was good, it was really good. So if we needed something, we could get it, And so going to Tucumcari, that was completely opposite. It was very poor compared to like Hobbs, and it was we needed some help, and it was and so then in a town of 5,000, we had just around 100, maybe a little more than 100 employees, and you don't realize how much you're actually doing as a city manager when you go from learning what the city manager does of a town of 45,000 compared to a town of 5,000 was really something I didn't expect. And so,
talk about that, because I think you learned how to wear multiple hats in Hobbs. Now as a city manager, you're still wearing multiple hats, but there's a difference. Like, I'm sure, like, I'm going to say it snowed, but I don't know if the weather, if it even snows in that area. But like, again, if it snows, or maybe you have a public works situation, sometimes the city manager got to get out there and put on the hard hat and get after it with the guys. Like, it can be a different environment of getting pulled into the weeds of different things because stuff just has to get done. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was like, we had a parks and rec board, and well, the city manager was expected to be at those meetings. We had a planning and zoning board meeting. Well, the city manager was expected to be at those meetings and run those meetings. And so the different departments, like, you just didn't have that you had the directors and but there was, because of the city manager title, there was more pressure on that role than having the directors maintain it,
Yeah.
And we had great staff. I mean, without a doubt, some of the finest in New Mexico, I thought. And so, but it was just different. You had to, you had to like direct so many different levels, it was a fun challenge. And again, it was drinking from a fire hose on learning how to do the different things and how to be a city manager. So, and then the politics that were thrown into it.
Yeah.
Because as a director, you know the politics are there, and you have to kind of play around the politics, but you're not forced into the politics. Mm-hmm. And as a city manager, especially in a smaller town, the politics are heavy. So that was pretty unique. So
yeah, talk about that, because that's one of the things people don't understand. Is it's one thing to be a director, assistant city manager. You're going to interact with council and you're going to have presentations. The city manager role, it's kind of like I think, again, I've never been a city manager, but when I became a lead pastor, I mean, it was so, like, you could feel just the difference of the weight now, because it wasn't just me. That title, everyone looks to that title, and that's where they all of a sudden, it's one thing to, oh yeah, we want you to do our wedding, we want this. When you become the lead pastor, everyone just wants the lead pastor to be at everything. We want you at every hospital, we want you at every birthday celebration, and because they want the main guy there. And then you're dancing with the politics of who are we offending this week, or what did and you're doing that for the entire organization too, not just you. And so you're balancing what I call it, you're on the municipal tightrope, what kind of can feel like a tightrope walk. And you've got these three aspects. Sometimes they can be kind of like a snake. You've got council, and it's not like your council all thinks alike. They've got their own opinions. You've got staff. That's a lot to manage, different departments, people kind of fighting silos and the realities that can happen there in bureaucracy. But then you have residents, and they all have their, desires and their entitlements. And so it can be a lot for one person to feel like the weight of that, like everything can kind of come at you as this lightning bolt of, fix it, make it right. It's you. How did you, what was it like to feel that for the first time?
I'm sure you probably experienced very similar as a lead pastor. I mean, you had probably a board of elders that you had to keep happy. You had a congregation you had to keep happy, and wouldn't be surprised, depending on the size of your church, if you didn't have to lead music one day, right?
That's
so, right. I mean, I'm sure it was probably similar. And for me, I mean, just getting there, and I mean, like I said, I knew this is my first day in local government, I knew this is the career I was meant to have, that I spent the first 10 years out of college just trying to figure out who I was and what I was doing. And then as soon as I got there, I knew, I mean, I loved it. I loved even the political gameness of it, and by that, as a city manager, we can't be political, but the political game is learning how to not be political. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, especially when, you'd have council people, they would come in and they're, oh, can you believe this? Or this representative is having a fundraiser and I want you to come to it, but I can't be political. So I don't want to go to a fundraiser, but if he's just speaking, I would love to come meet him and advocate for the city, And so having to learn what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, having to, and that's what I was so thankful that when my time in Hobbs, that I got really involved in both ICMA and the New Mexico City Managers Association, because that code of conduct, the code of ethics is so strong in those organizations, that and the network that you create in those organizations are so strong. I had people across the nation from ICMA that I could lean into and say, hey, I got a council member asking me to come to this fundraiser and be there for this political, state rep, and I don't know what to do. Or I had people that could say, well, this is the line, don't cross it, And so it was really, but having to learn that for the first time and understanding what you can and can't do and how to say no without offending.
Yeah.
It was real fun. So
I love that you bring up the New Mexico City Management Association and ICMA, obviously the national global organization. And we'll talk about the TCMA Texas in just a moment when we get to Pilot Point. But again, it's not just so the awareness for other people. If you're in, the private sector, you go to your chamber of commerce, your Rotary meeting, and you hang out with other business owners or leaders, and you can ask those kind of questions. You're the only city manager in that city. And especially I'm sure like when you were in New Mexico and Hobbs and especially in Tucumcari, like where's the next even city, that has a city manager? You can be the only one for miles. And so it's not like you get together for a luncheon and just, asking these questions. And so these organizations, these associations are so necessary, especially I think for rural, smaller cities. And what I think I've gleaned over the last number of years in local government is that it's actually those that struggle the most to be a part of the associations. Man, our budgets are small. It's hard to travel because, I mean, even for you probably, I'm sure that was a trek going to a New Mexico Association conference because I'm sure they weren't hosting them in Hobbs. Because again, either probably in the center of the state or in the bigger cities. And so it can be hard to make it that. But again, that's why I say, man, try to make it. Try to make those things on your calendar, because not only do you have the impact to get on an email list or the listserv and be like, hey, this is what I'm going through. Those face-to-face moments, build those relationships, they make those connections so that when you go back to your place and you feel alone, you can reach out and you kind of have some relationships. You already have some connections. So I just encourage people to there is value in that. I know it's a challenge. I know that your job is so busy. It can be like, gosh, I don't have time for a conference. I'm going out to Maine here in a couple of weeks. And I've been talking to a few people who are in the far reaches of Maine, and they're just like, I can't make it out, man. It's too far. And I'm just like, okay, I get it. And so I'm even looking at now, it's why we're doing this Halting Winter tour. Like, how can I come out then to the edges of the earth and to be an encouragement, if I come out to a state, but maybe speak to that. I'm sure it was a challenge sometimes to make it a priority to go out to those things.
It was tough. Yeah, it was tough. And I will say in Hobbs at one point, we did get to host the New Mexico Municipal Leagues conference. So that was really, really fun. It was a lot of work for the city. Yeah. You don't realize how much work putting one of those conferences on is, but it was great. And as part of that, one of my, divisions was featured because the community event that they did, we did a vaccination clinic that they got to volunteer for and help out. And so it was part of the animal adoption center. And so it was a neat experience. But other than that, I mean, it was, like you had said earlier, it was like 5 hours to Albuquerque, a little further to Santa Fe. And that's where we would go a lot. And so that was a long trip. And then, Ruidoso, it was closer, but it was still it's still 2.5 hours. And then, or even Las Cruces. And so it was spread out and far in between. But like I said, JJ really supported me and helped me out and to do a lot of that. And then once I got to Tucumcari, I had a lot of support from the council, or actually they were commissioned, same difference, right? But they were commissioned there, and I had a lot of support from the commissioners to make sure that I stayed plugged in. I mean, going to those conferences and catching up on best practices, working the network, getting to know that. I mean, it's really how you keep your batteries charged. Yeah. So, then, like you said, we're the only one in this seat. There's not another city manager. I have an assistant here in Pilot Point, but I'm the only city manager. So.
And I always, not only do I connect it to my pastoring past, but also to my conductor's past. I was like an orchestral conductor for the first chapter of my life, my Forrest Gump crazy life. And, a conductor, you kind of have friends with a concert master, and, you have different relationships with some of the section leaders, but at the end of the day, you're the conductor. And there's a definite split of difference, like between the podium and the musicians. And because you have a relationship with the board, you have a relationship with donors, I think, again, it's that unique there can only be one conductor. You can't have a multitude. And even though there's different relationships, you can't just, I think there has to be clarity. There has to be also some separation. I don't think, a city manager can run city management by kind of like, the assistants and the deputies, we're all in this together. We're all kind of the same. You're not the same. Like, the city manager is going to take a unique, feel and a unique brunt from city council, from the community, and only you can carry that. And that's not, I think, yes, you do need, I always advocate, like, do you have someone on your team that can speak real candidly with you and can be a help there? But there is still some things you just got to carry alone, and you just got to walk alone. And I think that's the reality of having that network of people who feel that same reality, and just knowing.
Well, it's just like leading your orchestra. You got to know what every division's doing, right? You can't just guess at what the trumpets are doing over here and the saxophones or the drummers are doing over here. You've got to know to make it, and it's got to all make sense and come together. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how we have to do things here, because at the end of the day, we're all working on the same team, trying to push forward a community.
Yes.
So it's similar to your orchestra, right? You're trying to make music. That's what we're trying to do.
I have this unique pleasure, this unique opportunity to meet with thousands of local government leaders from across the nation every year through conferences and workshops and the podcast. Just these interviews, these conversations are just so insightful. And one of the things I have learned about local government leaders is this: the best leaders are lifelong learners, not because they have all the answers. It's because they understand that leadership, that journey of leadership, is never finished. Every challenge, every difficult conversation, every budget season, every organizational change or disruption is another opportunity to grow. That's why this summer we're doing something different inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. We're launching a special summer series called Stories That Shape Leaders. You know that every week I take a best-selling book, usually a business book, and we break down its insights and apply them to local gov. This summer, we're taking biographies, memoirs, timeless leadership books that don't necessarily fall into those typical business, culture, strategy kind of genre. And we're going to explore the lives, the decisions, the failures, challenges, the lessons of leaders who navigated incredible adversity, who had to build trust when hope was fleeting, who inspired others not only to dream but to take action, and who left a lasting impact. Leadership isn't shaped just through strategies and frameworks alone. It is shaped through stories. Stories that challenge assumptions, stories that expand our perspective, stories that help us become the leaders our communities need us to be. When you join the MLDC, you unlock the entire summer series, but you unlock even more. You unlock the weekly leadership content, the live mastermind sessions, the nationwide community of local government leaders, and all the MLDC resources, not just for the summer, but for the rest of 2026. If you are looking for a place to continue growing this summer while connecting with leaders who understand the unique challenges of local government, I would love to invite you to join us. Learn more at haltingwinter.com/MLDC, or simply use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. Exactly. And so let's talk about Pilot Point, because not only are you this can be your second stop now, and I always find it interesting when you are a city manager in your first stop, just kind of the eye-opening reality to that role and to that function. But now it's always interesting when you have your second stop and you're like, oh, I've done this before. And you're like, wow, this is a different bowl. Like, it's just unique how cities are different. But not only do you, is this going to be your second stop in the city management role and where you're at currently today, you decide to make this change, and, in a time when really nothing's going on, April 2020, and just a pandemic, just breaks out. And so what in the world, that seems crazy to make a change like that. And I'm sure, talk about, when you come into a place, there's always, you got to do so much, like, you're just trying to get to know people in the organization. I would assume, like, what did that look like in April 2020 when the world was like virtual and you're trying to get to know people virtual? What in the world? How was even that hiring process, in light of that reality?
So fortunately, I got, my contract is actually approved in February. So beforehand, so I got at the council meeting in February is actually where my contract was approved, but my tooth and carry contract I had to give a 60-day notice. But within that 60 days, like you said, the world started shutting down, and it was crazy. I mean, it took me 6 months to meet staff because we were all working from home.
Yeah.
We were all in shutdown, and I had to move and relocate my whole family. And at one point, I think Governor Grisham was saying, well, in New Mexico, we're going to just shut the state, right? We're going to close the borders. And so but I'm starting a new job. I'm moving my family. So we had to stop everything and we had to try to move. And so we weren't supposed to start, or I wasn't supposed to start until the 8th. And then I got here on the 1st because of the uncertainty of what was going to happen. So it was no break with the transition. And then it was my first 3 years here was, eye-opening. I don't even know where it went. It was from COVID, and then we had demonstrations on our square from the George Floyd marches. And then we went back into COVID, and all of this time, I wound up having 21 council people in my first 3 years.
Wow.
And 3 mayors. It was a whirlwind of everything. And I missed my first 2 Texas city managers meetings because one was because they skipped it for COVID. And then the second one, we have a great lake in our backyard. It's amazing. Lake Ray Roberts, Bassmaster Classic's been on it twice now since I've been here. And we had Bassmasters during one of them. And so, we were partnering with the city of Fort Worth to try to make something cool. And try to get Pilot Point recognized for having Lake Ray Roberts in our backyard. So, so it was. I didn't get to meet many city managers in Texas. Like I got to know my neighboring cities, and that was about it. Until it took me a little bit of time before I actually was able to get plugged in here. So
the first 3 years, not only are you trying to figure out how to, manage a pandemic, which no one knows, especially I think it will be interesting if we ever can get clear of just the political chaos scene we're in right now, where everyone just judges, we're just kind of in this emotional weirdness where we're not really thinking logically about much anymore. Instead, it's kind of predetermined. But I think looking back and looking at, not only were you handling a real pandemic, right, with real cause and effect, but the political turmoil that it became, and decisions that were automatically judged. I felt that the pandemic led me out of ministry. I just did not want to deal with the stupidity of people anymore, and just the vitriol of pre-assumed judgments without looking at reality. I imagine that city managers face that same, every decision you make was going to be judged, not in even its reality of how it was helping to love and serve and care for people, but what its political overtones were. Right. And it's you're not even thinking, like you said, city managers are apolitical. We're there to serve the community, not make political statements. And yet everything was seen as a political statement. And it seems like what you were saying, with that much turnover, mayors and council, that city must have been an emotional hotbed of just swinging, trying to figure out, right, what do we have to say instead of what's really going on? And how did you, that seems like a crazy situation to be thrown into for your second dance, right, as a city manager, but also just I know, because I went through that pastorally as a leader, it took an incredible toll, because you've got to still show up. You still have to serve. There are people that need serving, but it's not like the whole town felt that way, but it's because that small little contingency is so loud and the weight is so, and it can feel so overwhelming to you because you have a good heart and you're on fumes, right? Trying to lead. And those little fumes you have are being just beaten, it feels like a piñata, on how wrong you are. How did you do it? How did you last? Because I would think in that situation, I would guess, if I heard your story, I'd be like, oh yeah, he must have left Pilot Point. You're still there. You're rocking and rolling. You persevered. How?
Yeah, I don't even know, because Seth, that was my first budget, and a Texas budget, which is way different because Texas is a property tax state, and most of our budgets are built around that. New Mexico was a GRT, a gross receipts tax, so totally different financial situation. Learning that, and I proposed to my council, after just a few months of being on the job, you're going to have to raise taxes because you're operating your enterprise fund in the red. So we got to move things around. And so having to figure that out on top of all this other stuff, raising taxes, I didn't think the council that was going to keep me around. Honestly, it was crazy. But I told you, I love what I do. I wanted to be back in Texas so bad. My family, I'm a 7th generation Texan, and so I wanted to be here, and I love Pilot Point. When I first came to visit it the first time, after my first interview, by the way, was in Santa Fe. It was like in November. I was in Santa Fe, or it was in January, I guess. I was in Santa Fe at the legislative session. And so I was in my hotel room. My first interview had to be a conference call. And oddly enough, in that interview, I didn't have my shoes on. And somehow that came up. And they said, well, why are you trying to come to Pilot Point? I said, because I'm a Texan and I want to be back in Texas. And I looked down at my feet because I didn't have my shoes on, and I had Texas socks on. And I said, I'm even wearing Texas socks right now in New Mexico. And they're, no way, prove it. So I had to put my feet up on the screen in my first interview. So I think that's probably what got me the job. But, the thing about all of that and where you look at, and you look at the form of government, the council manager form of government, you can have that pandemic happening. You can have the budget happening. You can have the turnover happening. This is the most resilient form of government and municipal government can have. I mean, and that's what got it. I mean, that's what pushed us through it. I have an amazing team of department heads here. I had tremendous support from the mayor at the time and the council at the time. And even though people didn't like some of what we were having to do, and people didn't like, the shutdown stuff and the we're not going to, City Hall can't be open you can't come in and pay your water bill. You got to do it virtually or drop it off in the mailbox. We had to do what we had to do. And because we had that tremendous support from the council and the staff, it made it, I couldn't give up on this, on Pilot Point ever. And I still feel that way. So
this is the perfect segue, because you went through this crazy time period, when you first started this pandemic, and like you said, especially for like when you moved there, I think the town was about 4,000 people, and so there's a lot of people who have always gone in to pay. Like that's what they do. They go into the city hall, and that's where they pay, and that's where they do the thing. And everyone like has if they're going to interact with city hall, this is how I do it. And all of a sudden the world changes, and it's like, right. Well, I don't know, I don't trust the internet, or I don't trust, and people, so you went through this whole kind of forced change of kind of the way things are and trying to figure out how we do things. But back to that article I mentioned at the top from Business Review magazine, honoring the past while preparing for the future. You come out of the pandemic, and guess what? Pilot Point now is just going to experience growth upon growth upon growth, where it just feels like every year's 100% growth. I mean, now you went from 4,000 2020 to now you're 10,000. And again, that doesn't sound crazy big. That is so much growth for a small town that has a small staff, that has, right, like you said, budget realities. This is one of the things. I live in Washington. Like you said, their budgets are built off of tax, off of housing. And they are capped here at 1% growth per year. I don't know about anyone else, but inflation has far outclipped 1%. Right. And so everyone is bankrupt. Everyone is struggling. Everyone is trying to figure out, how do you do this? How do we actually fund services? And I'm sure that there was, in this, like you said, people had a hard time with change with the pandemic. Talk about now, growth creates a whole new change, where it's like, I don't want things to change. I don't want new people here. I don't want new way of thinking here. You've got that crowd. You've obviously got people excited about, man, here's probably my first house. I'm in Pilot Point, and this is my place. And they're trying to, and I love as I dove into that article, honoring the past while preparing the future, it looks like you guys are doing an amazing job of saying, how can we still keep our identity, the way the downtown looks, some of the what do you call that? The storefront kind of, the marquees. It seems like you're really being intentional about how do we hold on to who we are and where we've been, while also making sure that the future is bright, that it's flourishing, that we're not saying no just because it's uncomfortable, but we're pressing into what's possible. Talk about that, because that seems like, again, coming out of the pandemic with the realities of change and kind of emotional turmoil, seems like that could be a turmoil point too.
Yeah, we've got so much growth happening, and we've got a lot of these people, kind of like you said, they're a lot of them are moving here. This is their first home, but a lot of them are moving from the Metroplex area just south of here, and they're coming in. They're like, well, we try to move to a small town because we were tired of the growth, we were tired of the people, and now you're just inviting all these people. So they moved here, and then they wanted us to shut the gate behind them.
Right.
So
that's right.
And then like you said, we have the people, we have generations here. I talked about my being a 7th generation Texas and my family farm. And that's how, there are last names that you recognize in Pilot Point because you can go back to its founding and those last names are on document. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And it's created that real strong, this is who we are. And why are you changing what we are and who we are? And whether I like it or not, or any city manager, the city manager gets blamed for some of that. The mayor, the council gets blamed for some of that. And so what we're trying to do, like you said, we're really focused on preserving who we are and what got us to where we're at. Our downtown, we've got one of the oldest brick building in Denton County on our downtown square. We are part of the National Registry for Historic Places with our downtown. And so we've done a lot of investment in planning for the growth to make sure that as we grow, that we're growing appropriately and that we're going to do things the way we can and preserve who we are, because people like Pilot Point, not because it's growing, not because it's small, not because people like Pilot Point for what Pilot Point is. And that's what we're trying to hold on to. We're trying to maintain who we are, what we're doing, and invest in people, invest in our community. We've got strong festivals downtown that brings the community together. We're doing a lot of reinvestment in our downtown. The city, we actually bought a building that was in our downtown historic district so that we can work with somebody to come in and revitalize it. And so we're now doing economic development incentives with these people. We've done an economic development, a significant investment in another very huge. We have the FNB Bank that was actually featured in the old Bonnie and Clyde movies from the 1960s with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. And so our municipal development district, our EDC, has purchased another property. And so we're working real hard to create that downtown experience. We're working real hard with the local developers to make sure that we're bringing in these master plan communities. But hey, this is a community-driven parks and trails master plan, and this property that you're on features trails that you can get from one side of the lake to the other. And and Pilot Point's known for horse country. We want some of these to be horse trails because we want people to be able to still do the equine stuff here. We want to really focus on some of that outdoor recreation, the adventure recreation with the horse trails. There's bike trails, there's kayak around the lake, so we're trying to really lean into that and like I said, preserve who we are. We have some of the best horse ranches in all of America right here in Pilot Point. So
maybe speak to, because I want to encourage both, because I think there are many cities in Texas that are just experiencing, it seems like everyone I talk to in Texas is experiencing this rapid growth and trying to figure out how to do it, especially those cities that are kind of in that 5,000 moving to like 10, 15,000. I'm sure Pilot Point will probably 15,000 the next time I talk to you. And then I think about South Carolina. I think about even in some cities in Idaho with kind of people fleeing, Washington and trying to, move over there. There are cities all over the country that are experiencing this kind of growth. When you think about what has helped, if you were to look at what you've been through and now to encourage some of those, maybe speak to three things. The first is planning. I think I am still surprised by how many cities do not have a strategic plan. And especially when you experience that kind of growth, it's just sometimes the temptation can just be to ride the bull and just figure it out. The issue is if a city has to figure out, like it has so many components. It has housing, it has economic development, and you can get tilted pretty quickly and handicap your future because you just went one way. Talk about the strategic plan, how is both knowing where you're going years ahead and holding on to that somewhat loosely, because if you hold on too tightly, then maybe you say no to opportunity, but also then making sure the priorities are clear so you know how to manage the day-to-day of that growth.
Yeah, so we've spent significant time on our comprehensive downtown and our comprehensive plan. We actually did a whole master plan study that included our comprehensive plan, our downtown master plan, our parks and trails plan. So we did like kind of a trifecta here because we wanted to make sure that all the plans work together.
Yes.
We wanted to manage the growth without saying no to the growth, because I mean, the growth is your lifeblood, and in Texas, they're going to do it anyway. And so it's about how they do it. And we want to make sure that they're doing it the way we want to do it. And so, so the biggest thing was the community buy-in, with those plans. Those plans, they're great and they work amazingly, but if you don't have the community buy-in and if you just put them on a shelf, they're not doing anything. And so spending the time with the community, we did several community events with our consultants. We did some of the events on our downtown square in our coffee shop that's down there. They were part of our community events, our markets on Main, our downtown markets and stuff. They were always part of that. We were always trying to get that buy-in. We did online surveys, and now we've hired Invisio actually to the software because we don't want to just put it on the shelf. We want to have it, and we want to be accountable. We want to be transparent to our citizens that we're engaged in this. We want to be able to say, look, not only did you help us develop this plan, but this is how we're implementing it. This is how we're moving it forward. And this is what we're doing with your ideas. And so we've got Invisio so that we can show progress on some of these goals and strategies. And so, and that I think without that planning and without knowing where you're heading and what you're doing, it makes it tough, And so it's really key to the success we've had.
I love that. And I want to just highlight again, it's not just one strategic plan. You had multiple plans there. You had the downtown, the trails, you had multiple aspects, but then you did the hard work of going, do these work together? Because I think that's the thing. We can love to get away and do our planning. And then either we come back and we're like, oh crap, like now we're fighting over which one we give precedence to and prioritize. Or like you said, we can just put them we did the work and then we put them in the closet and just let, life happen. And we're directed more by the winds instead of by the plan. And I think that, and maybe second, I love how you talked about community and engagement. You have a podcast. You guys did a podcast for communication. Talk about communication. I think it's one of the issues I find in all kinds of leadership, but especially in local government, is you guys are so busy. You've mentioned in your story, you're wearing so many hats. You've got so many things coming at you that you're trying to figure out. Sometimes I think the issue is we are working on this stuff so intensely, and we've been working on it for so long that we're like, how does not everybody know about this? But it's because you're so in the weeds of it. You've been talking about it forever, thinking about it forever. The community hasn't. They have no idea what's really going on behind the scene. And that's one of the reasons I think local government struggles is by the time they're ready to communicate, they know too much. And so they communicate in ways that the resident just turns off because they go, I don't understand. It's too complicated. It's full of acronyms. It's whatever. How have you found some tools and some wins to communicate not only with the community, but with staff, keeping everyone aligned and prioritized, with the council to make sure that because the last thing a council wants is to run into a resident and be like, hey, I heard this. And they're like, I don't really know about that, right? I'm sure that's come up in your lifetime. It comes up with everyone. How are you doing communication, especially from the city manager seat, that you're finding is doing things well?
So I think, again, at the end of the day, we're here to work for the community. And so doing that engagement, doing that piece is so important. And it's hard. And I wish I had like the silver bullet, right? I would bottle it and sell it. But it's impossible to know exactly, because every community is a little bit different. But we started a podcast. A friend of mine that actually owns the coffee house and we sit down and we called it the Pilot Point Podcast. And it was just a conversation. And it didn't. And a lot of the times it wasn't about government necessarily or about the things that we're doing. It's about who we are, because we wanted to personalize our staff. We wanted to personalize people around Pilot Point because there's so many things. And I don't know if this is a result of the COVID or what, but neighborhoods and the way that neighborhoods engage your neighbor, that doesn't happen like it used to. And there's so many different Facebook groups and next door groups, and you're always having to fight those truths,
Yep.
Or untruths.
Yeah.
And so trying all the different mediums that you can try. I do a coffee with the city manager on the third Thursday of every month, where I just go sit at the coffee shop, have coffee. And if somebody wants to come in, they want to talk about bass fishing or hunting, I'm there to talk about it. If they want to talk about why their trash was missed, I'm there to talk about it. And so those are the things that we really want to focus on. We really want to engage. The mayor and I are actually planning on this upcoming month in August sometime, trying to go out to some of the HOAs and actually sitting down at an HOA meeting and talking about, hey, this is what Pilot Point's doing. Because we do have a great plan. We are doing some things successful, and we want to make sure that people know that, and that people feel like they're engaged, and that they've got a say. And because, like I said, at the end of the day, we're really working for the community. And as far as staff goes, from our master plans and everything that we've done to make sure that we have good planning, and we created internally our Pilot Point promise. Which is kind of our value set, and it's kind of what we do to show who we are and how we do things. Our Pilot Point promise is it stands for professional, respectful, open, mindful, inclusive, service oriented, and excellent. And we recognize our staff for being promise champions and exhibiting those for the things that they do out in the community, and how they interact with our residents. So through staff meetings, and so everybody's working on that. And one of my favorite leadership books is Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette. Yeah. And in that, he talks about having, how you get everybody's a leader in your organization, and you have everybody working for the same goal, then it creates just a more efficient team and better. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get everybody from our street tech one brand new person off the street, getting buy-in on our promise and how they execute that promise with our residents and their job, and how it touches the community. And so that's what we're doing all the way up to my seat. And so
it's so interesting that you mentioned that book. It's one of my favorite books. In fact, I've gone through it twice now in our leadership program, just because I think it's that good. Would encourage everyone, again, Turn the Ship Around, David Marquette. And the story, really, what's interesting then, as you bring that up, your story in Tucumcari, when you become the city manager there, it must have felt like, again, kind of like you were David on that ship, like everything's coming to you. You got to you got to be at every meeting, everything. And the whole story about Turning the Ship Around is that he was like, man, we're the worst sub in the fleet because everything has to come through me, and I'm the bottleneck, and I don't even know what to do, because it was a sub that he had never been trained on. So he had to really rely on his people on that team. And so now in Pilot Point, I'm sure it's like, hey, how can we get even our front line to take ownership and to make decisions to, again, complete the promise narrative of great service and excellence. And so I just love that. I think, man, we could talk for another hour. I want to be mindful of your time today, but so many great things, and would just encourage the listeners, if anything resonated there, I'm sure, reach out to Britt. He'd love to chat and share more of his story and more of his insights. Tell us as we close, I always like to hit on work-life balance, because, again, you've mentioned it, this world never shuts off. This city doesn't sleep, or that growth isn't going to take a hiatus. So Britt can go take get a massage and take a spa day. Like life happens. How do you, I say balance is impossible. It's more about intention. How do you stay intentional about the other aspects of life? You're married, you got kids, you got life happening, you got other relationships, but you also have a self, and you're not Superman. Your tank isn't endless. You've got to rejuvenate. You got to, do you bass fish? Do you get out in the lake yourself? Yeah. Like, what does Britt do to recharge?
Yeah, I love being outdoors, and my wife and I we'll take the bass boat out. We'll go bass fishing on Lake Ray Roberts. Like I said, it's a phenomenal lake to go bass fishing on. We just bought a travel trailer, so we're going to try to start doing some traveling around in the travel trailer, and go to different state parks, and just get out and just find a place with no cell phone coverage and see how it goes. So, but I'm super lucky and fortunate in Pilot Point because I've got great staff. We've got the Pilot Point promise, and we work together really well, and that keeps everybody where we need to be, and so we can actually do things that are great to helping. Just a moment. I'm sorry.
No,
Life happens, right?
This is a perfect city management moment. Oh,
sorry about that.
See, there you got a true open door policy. You got the door right out to the crowd. Anyone comes in at any moment. I love it.
So,
well, that's the reality, right? Is that just like that, like your life, you can set all the boundaries you want, but the reality is you're on. And people, when they want to meet with a city manager, when they want, that role does come with a title, and that title brings, can bring assurance, it can bring direction, and it can be hard, don't you find, in the servant leader mindset to want to pour out? It can be hard to create boundaries to make sure that you have time to fill up.
It is. It's very tough. I mean, because you don't get to go grocery shopping and not be the city manager.
That's
Somebody
right.
sees you in the aisle, they're going to ask you something about the city. I mean, it's just the way it's going to be.
Yep.
And so it is important to take the time to try to recharge and go connect with people and connect with other professionals in this city management role because they can relate. So,
yeah. Well, I'm hoping to get down to Texas here soon to have the privilege of speaking at one of the TCMA conferences coming up, and then we're trying to bring the Halting Winter Tour down there, where not only do we have the conference, but then we stop along all these cities and start telling the cool stories about what you guys are up to. And so I kind of see it as I just forgot his name. What's the Dirty Jobs guy? Mike
Rowe.
Mike Rowe, right? Well, like, how can we become the Mike Rowe of local gov and just kind of go out and share, like, what's going on? Like, what'd you do with your downtown? That's so cool that you're engaging in preservation, but in a fresh way, not in just, I was going to say, I know a city I'm well acquainted with that, man, everything is like, oh, it's a historic downtown. It's just like, no, you just don't want to change. It looks horrible. You haven't invested in any kind of cool historic downtown. You just don't want to make anyone mad. And it's like, that's not healthy. That's not going to bring new life and new energy. And it seems like you guys are doing some pretty cool things. And it's challenging, right? Because again, not everyone's going to be happy. I had a mentor once. He goes, if you want to make everyone happy, go sell ice cream. And I thought about that. He mentioned that to me like 18 years ago. And I thought about a decade later, I go, you can't even sell ice cream anymore because half the people are lactose intolerant, Right. So you're always going to make someone upset. The key is, where are you going? And how are you serving people with engagement and excellence every day? And I think, man, it's just so inspiring to hear what you're doing there in Pilot Point. And what an inspiring story, too, to kind of, find your way to this unique thing of local gov. And I love that you said when you got there, you knew this was it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was it. So
I love it. Well, Britt, thanks for sharing your life, your leadership journey, and your insights today. It was a real privilege.
Appreciate it, Seth. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter Podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.